Okay, so back onto this refinish job. And the first thing I want to do with this is just to strip off all the old lacquer, which means we're going to lose the decal on the front of the headstock, and we're also going to lose the serial number on the back. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to take a photograph of that, and I can redo that. I'll just create a water slide decal to look as much like that as I possibly can. So when we come to lacquer this up again, I can put that back on. Once I've got this cleaned up, we need to do something about these tuner holes because they are too big for the new bushings. Some people spoke about using some conversion bushings, which I am aware of, which kind of will fit these 10mm holes and the tuner at the same time. But the problem I've got is these holes are actually slightly out of position for the tuners that I'm going to use, and it will mean there would be gaps, which I'm not really particularly happy with. For me, it seems a better option just to plug these holes up and re-drill them in the right positions. They're only ever so slightly out, so it shouldn't cause any problems at all, but that's the way I'd prefer to do it. If after plugging them I don't like the way it's turned out, we can always just re-drill these out to 10mm and buy those additional bushings, but for the time being I'd much prefer to just go with my original plan of plugging them. Okay, so I'll get some ear dependers on and we'll get this sanded off. Okay, so there's the lacquer off the neck. It's not fully finished sanded, but it is kind of pretty close to where I need it. I've left the lacquer on in a couple of places. I haven't done anything about around the bottom end of the headstock because we're going to be removing a fair amount of this material anyway, so absolutely no point spending any time cleaning that off. And I've also left this area at the heel primarily because it's got the date stamp on. I'm not going to try in any way to attempt to disguise what this is. It will have one of my logos on the front of the headstock, but it will also have the original serial number and kind of crafted in China markings on the back of the headstock. You know, it's a Squire, it will always be a Squire, but that doesn't mean it can't be a nice looking and playing guitar. So with that done, we can now start to figure out what we're going to do with these 6 holes for the tuners. And it's relatively straightforward. I've got a 10mm plug cutter. Here's one I prepared earlier. And I've just got a piece of maple. I'm going to cut 6 of these. I'm going to try and get it in a piece of maple that matches this grain as well as I can. It's obviously going to be impossible to do it at 100%. And I'll just glue those in place. They kind of fit relatively snugly. but there is a little bit of a gap around them, as you might be able to see there. But obviously we're going to glue these in with a water-based wood glue, which will probably just swell those plugs up ever so slightly and give us a bit of a better fit. We can also, once we've got them in position and trimmed down, we can just kind of probably do a little bit of wood glue and sawdust mix just to fill in any little gaps that there might be. Hopefully there won't be any to worry about. So I'll drop over to the drill press, we'll get some plugs drilled out and see if we can get them glued in. And with that done, we can just start to glue these in. Now you might have noticed I put a pencil line on the bit of wood that I cut these out of, and that was purely because that was kind of like where what I thought was matching grain was happening. So we can then use that pencil line to kind of line this up when we glue these in. Now I'm not going to be shy with the glue because I actually want to introduce a little bit of moisture into this to try and kind of close that gap up a little bit, just by making this plug swell up to a certain extent. So I'm just slip that in, leaving it a little bit proud. Clean up some of the glue. Okay, so that's those glued in. I've rubbed a little bit of the really fine sanding dust around the edge of those, and that will hopefully kind of take care of any little gaps that there might be. So we'll give these a couple of hours to dry up and get them flushed off. Okay, so these have had quite a little while now to dry up. Went and got some lunch. So I'm just going to take a nice sharp chisel and just very slowly kind of pare this material away until I get somewhere near level with the rest of the headstock. This is one of those jobs where you just want to take it nice and slowly. And to try and take too big a bite, you kind of run the risk of tearing the wood out and leaving a bit of a gap, which is obviously something you don't want. Now I've had quite a lot of really good feedback on this project so far, which is nice because I was a little bit kind of concerned about how it would be received. And I think one take on that is that perhaps a project like this is a little bit more accessible to people, in so much as most people with access to a limited amount of working space and a few basic tools could perhaps attempt something like this where they couldn't really do a full build. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think of that, and also if you'd kind of like to see more content along these lines or not. Okay, so let's flatten down pretty much as far as they need to go now, so I think I'll just break the sander out again and just give those a final clean up. Okay, they're sanded off. You can still see them. They haven't disappeared, but you need to remember we're going to be drilling out kind of 9 of those 10mm, so very little of that is going to remain. I'm not, however, going to drill these out right now. I'm going to leave that for a little while because I'm going to turn this over and start to get this set up for changing it to the smaller headstock. And the way we're going to do that is just kind of by lining the template up and then just kind of marking around with a pencil. To kind of show us where we need to be trimming. Now, as you can see here, there's a slight difference in the way that this goes, but that will just be a case of kind of blending those 2 radii in when we get to the sanding stage. So I'll get this over to the bandsaw, we will trim the worst of that away, then we can get the template back on and do a little bit of routing. Okay, so that's the headstock kind of shaped. It's not been fine sanded or anything, so there are still 1 or 2 little bits that will need doing, but I'm much happier with that. The big headstock shape was just making my teeth itch, really didn't like it. So next up is we need to get these tuners fitted, and I've done a little bit of working out based off the spacing on this template, which is what I need, but I can't really use this template because I can't really fit it where I need it on the front, and if I put it on the back, the holes don't line up with the holes that we've got. I can't really, you might be able to see it there, they just don't really line up at all. So what I'm going to have to do is mark this out on the front, and it's fairly straightforward. I'll take a marking gauge, set that to 1/2 inch, and I'm just going to put a mark on either end of there, run a line through, and start at the centre of that one and just step them off with my dividers. Now these should fall kind of roughly in the centre, but as we work our way through, it's going to move ever so slightly away from the centre. As I think you can see there, it's pulled this back probably 1.5 mm maybe, and with the old layout there was a very slight gap, so I need to kind of come in just that little bit to make sure that we don't have that. So hopefully that kind of makes it all make a bit more sense. And we need to drill those holes out to accommodate these bushings, which I'm measuring at, I don't know if you can see that, 9.2 something millimeters. I've got a 9.1 millimeter drill bit, which will just leave us a little bit of interference fit there. So that looks to be spot on. And that flange is 11 millimeters. So we have got a little bit of room to play with, which I'm hoping is going to be enough to cover those patches that we've put in. So I'm just going to go and find a suitable size drill bit, and we can get these drilled out. Okay, and there, hopefully you'll be able to see that there's kind of just the faintest little bit around that edge of that plug that I put in left. These are a nice push fit. Normally I don't put these in, but I can actually get to the back of these very easily, so I can just knock them back out again. So we'll put them in this case. And as I'd hoped, that flange covers up all of that wood I've put in, so they look absolutely spot on. Very happy with them. I'll try my best to film this, but I think they look a lot better than the old ones did. So very happy with how that's gone. There was a fair bit of work there just to make the changes to the headstock, but I think it's the kind of detail work that will really kind of transform this guitar and make it look an awful lot better, in my opinion anyway. I've got to plug these little holes where the pin from the old tuners used to go. I'll just use some cocktail sticks or something for that. But I'm going to do that off camera. I think we've covered quite enough ground for this episode, so I'll leave this one here. As always, don't forget to hit that like button if you've enjoyed this. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. Leave a comment below on what you think about this project and if you'd like to see similar stuff in the future, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.